March 17, 1943. The folder marked Tirpitz Sufa 76-78, Berlin crashed onto the mahogany desk with such force that coffee leapt from Admiral Wilhelm Canaris's porcelain cup, splattering across intelligence papers, documents that would have meant immediate execution if the Gestapo ever saw them. "This is impossible," Canaris snapped. "American propaganda. Lies fed to us through compromised agents." Through the tall windows of Abwehr headquarters, the Landwehr Canal lay motionless below, the same water where Rosa Luxemburg's body had been dumped nearly a quarter-century earlier. Now, as head of German military intelligence, Canaris stood frozen, gripping a report that threatened not merely Nazi propaganda, but the very arithmetic on which Germany believed victory was inevitable. Intercepted communications and field reports from agents still operating in Mexico City all pointed to the same unbelievable conclusion: Ford Motor Company's Willow Run plant was producing one B-24 Liberator bomber every single hour. The B-24 was no simple machine. It contained 1.5 million individual parts, nearly 500,000 rivets, and over 30,000 components, assembled into an 18-ton aircraft. And yet these bombers were rolling off the assembly line faster than Germany could produce a single Kübelwagen. Major Friedrich Wilhelm Heinz stood rigidly at attention before Canaris's desk. He had verified the data 3 times. The numbers did not change. What neither man yet understood was that this report marked the beginning of one of the greatest intelligence failures in modern warfare: the inability of German intelligence to comprehend, accept, or effectively communicate the true scale of American industrial power. A failure that would doom the Third Reich through a fatal miscalculation of mathematics and time. The collapse of German understanding had begun 2 years earlier. In 1941, Luftwaffe General Karl Kohler presented Hermann Göring with reports from military attaché General Friedrich von Boeticher in Washington. American aircraft production, the reports warned, was approaching 2,000 planes per month. Göring laughed. Not metaphorically, he laughed out loud. "The Americans build refrigerators and razor blades," he scoffed. "Not aircraft." For days after Pearl Harbor, Göring repeated the claim to Hitler at the Wolfschanze. America, he insisted, was weak. Democracy made it inefficient. Its population was too divided. Its industry too soft. It simply could not produce what it claimed. By March 1943, German intelligence networks throughout the Americas were reporting something that shattered every assumption of Nazi racial theory and economic belief. The reports came from everywhere: Mexican industrialists sympathetic to Germany, Spanish diplomats, Swedish businessmen passing through Detroit, even intercepted letters written by American factory workers to relatives in neutral countries. All said the same thing. Ford's Willow Run plant alone was producing more heavy bombers than all of Germany's aircraft factories combined. Oberstleutnant Nikolaus Ritter, head of Abwehr Air Intelligence, spent 3 weeks analyzing the data. A former Lufthansa pilot who had lived in the United States for a decade before the war, Ritter understood American industry better than most men in Berlin. In the 1920s, his Manhattan apartment overlooked the construction of the Chrysler Building. He had watched Americans raise the world's tallest skyscraper in less than 2 years. When Ritter reported to Canaris, his conclusion was blunt. If these figures are correct, and I believe they are, then Germany has already lost the war. What remains is only mathematics, and time. The intelligence arrived through indirect and dangerous channels. In Mexico City, George Nikolaus ran the Abwehr's primary network, cultivating sources among American businessmen who traveled freely between Detroit and Mexico's oil fields. Over dinner and drinks, they spoke casually of industrial wonders, unaware that every word was being recorded. On February 3, 1943, American oil executive Harold Morrison attended a reception at the German-Mexican Commerce Association. After several tequilas, he began describing his recent tour of Willow Run, arranged by Ford to impress potential investors. "What I saw defies explanation," Morrison said, unaware that Wolfgang Blau, a German agent posing as an Argentine leather merchant, was memorizing every detail. The assembly line stretches more than a mile. The building is so vast clouds form inside it. Sometimes it even rains indoors. They employ 42,000 workers, thousands of women, building the most complex machine ever created. Morrison sketched on a napkin as he spoke. The bomber has 2 bomb bays, 4,000 pounds of ordnance each. 4 engines, 1,200 horsepower apiece. The aircraft is built in sections, sub-assemblies, that flow together like rivers into the sea. Wings arrive from one direction. Fuselages from another. Tail assemblies from a third. They converge at precise points along the line. Blau asked carefully, "Surely that complexity causes delays?" Morrison laughed. "That's what Consolidated Aircraft thought. They said you can't build airplanes like cars. Ford proved them wrong. He broke the bomber into 60,000 individual operations. Each worker repeats the same task endlessly. A woman who cooked breakfast yesterday now installs hydraulic lines today. They train workers in days, not months. Some of the most detailed intelligence came through Franco's Spain. Colonel José Ungría, Spain's military attaché in Washington, maintained close ties with American manufacturers while quietly feeding intelligence to Germany in exchange for tungsten, vital to Spanish industry. In March 1943, Ungría attended a reception at the Argentine embassy, where he met Charles Sorensen, Ford's production chief and the architect of Willow Run. Believing Ungría represented a neutral nation that might one day buy aircraft, Sorensen spoke freely. "When I visited Consolidated San Diego plant in 1940, Sorensen said, unaware his words would reach Berlin within weeks, they built B-24s outdoors, each one different, taking 180,000 man-hours per plane. I knew we could do better." Pressed for technical details, Sorensen continued. "I redesigned the entire process overnight. We would move the aircraft past stationary workers, just like automobiles. Each man, each woman, performs a single task until perfection becomes automatic." Asked about labor challenges, Sorensen smiled. "We train 8,000 workers a week. Women make up 40% of our workforce, better at precision work, more patient. We have black workers operating complex machinery. 16-year-olds managing logistics. Democracy means using every human resource available." Reports continued to arrive. Swedish engineer Erik Lundberg toured Willow Run in March 1943. His conclusion stunned Berlin. The efficiency defies European understanding. 1,600 specialized machine tools, many built for single tasks. Capital investment alone may exceed $200 million. Even Japanese intelligence confirmed it. A coded message from Commander Toshikazu Omi reported that a single American factory was producing more aircraft each month than Japan's entire aviation industry. By April 1943, German intelligence had compiled data from 17 independent sources. The conclusion was unavoidable. At peak output, Willow Run alone produced 650 B-24 bombers per month. Total American production exceeded 1,400 monthly. The war, whether Germany accepted it or not, had already been decided, by factories, by numbers, and by time. Desperate for something he could call ground truth, Canaris authorized Operation Pastorius, a submarine insertion of saboteurs onto American soil. The mission carried 2 objectives, though only one would be spoken aloud. 2 4-man teams would land, disappear, and prepare sabotage. But Canaris's private instruction, kept off paper, came first: confirm the industrial reality. Get photographs. Count employees. Track shipments. Bring back proof so undeniable that even Berlin would be forced to look at it. One of those teams was led by George John Dash, a man who had lived in the United States for 2 decades before returning to Germany in 1939. He knew America not as an abstract enemy, but as a place he'd walked, worked, and watched. In the early hours of June 13, 1942, Dash's team came ashore at Amagansett, Long Island, having disembarked from U-202 just after midnight. Within days, crushed by what his mission implied, and haunted by what he already believed about American capacity, Dash walked into the arms of the FBI and surrendered. During interrogation, he told his captors something that caught them off guard. Canaris himself told me, Dash said, that Berlin doesn't believe your production figures. They think Willow Run is propaganda. He wanted photographs, employee counts, shipping records, proof that would force Göring to accept reality. FBI Special Agent Charles Landman stared at him. They don't believe we're producing a bomber an hour? Dash let out a bitter laugh. Agent Landman. I lived here. I've seen your automobile factories. I tried to tell them, if Ford could produce a car every minute before the war, they can produce a bomber every hour during it. They accused me of being a defeatist. On April 20, 1943, Hitler's 54th birthday, Canaris decided to go straight to the man whose delusions mattered most. He traveled to Carenhall, Göring's extravagant hunting estate north of Berlin, and presented the case personally. The meeting would become legendary inside German intelligence, not because of what Canaris brought, but because of how completely reality was rejected. Canaris arrived with photographs, intercepted documents, and reports from dozens of channels. He laid them out across Göring's massive oak table like a dealer revealing a hand that everyone in the room knew would end the game. Herr Reichsmarschall, Canaris began carefully, we have confirmation from 17 independent sources. The Ford Willow Run plant is producing one B-24 Liberator every hour at peak. They've maintained this rate consistently since January. Göring, well over 280 pounds by this stage of the war, picked up a photograph of the assembly line vanishing into the distance. He studied it for a moment, then looked up with contempt. Canaris, he said, do you take me for a fool? These are wooden mock-ups, props for propaganda. The Americans want us to believe they build aircraft like sausages. He tossed the photo down. This plant produces 50 bombers a month at most. Canaris slid forward another document, an intercepted Pennsylvania Railroad manifest detailing aluminum shipments. Herr Reichsmarschall, they are consuming 16 million pounds of aluminum per month at this one plant. That's more than our entire monthly production. Göring's laughter was sharp, almost angry. Then where do they get this aluminum? From their Negro workers? From women with rivet guns? Canaris, you've been deceived. A week later, Canaris was summoned to the Wolfschanz to brief Hitler personally. The room included senior officers, Jodl and Keitel, and propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels. Hitler was absorbed in maps of the Eastern Front, where the Wehrmacht was preparing Operation Citadel, the coming battle at Kursk. He listened, but impatiently, as Canaris laid out the figures. Mein Führer, Canaris said, fully aware of the risk, if the Americans are producing 1,400 B-24s per month, plus comparable numbers of B-17s, plus fighters, plus British output, then the aerial bombardment of the Reich will soon exceed our ability to defend it. Hitler's response came exactly as Canaris feared. Admiral, Hitler said, the Americans can mass-produce simple goods, automobiles, refrigerators. But a bomber is not a car. It requires precision, skill, dedication. When it took us 6 years to prepare for war, they claimed to have achieved this in 16 months. He waved a hand over the numbers. Impossible. General Jodl began calculating quietly. Even if we accept 1/4 of these figures. The figures are false, Hitler cut in. They entered the war in December 1941. Building this miraculous factory and reaching such output in that time is impossible. What the Nazi leadership did not know was that Canaris had obtained something even harder to dismiss, film footage of Willow Run in full operation, acquired through intelligence contacts in Switzerland and smuggled via Spanish diplomatic pouches. In a locked room at Abwehr headquarters, Canaris and his deputy Hans Oster watched the reel. The camera traveled along the mile-long line. B-24s moved past in every stage of construction, advancing at an unbroken pace. Men and women, black and white, performed their tasks with mechanical precision. In several shots, a clock confirmed the timing. "My God," Oster whispered. "It's true." Canaris said nothing. He took a lighter, held the flame to the film, and watched it curl and blacken. "We cannot show this to them," he said. "They will accuse us of forging it, or call us traitors." In November 1943, German intelligence acquired aerial photographs of Willow Run taken by a Spanish diplomat. Analysts worked for weeks. The parking lots held roughly 12,000 cars, pointing to three-shift operations. At the adjacent airfield, 47 completed B-24s sat ready for delivery. Through skylights, the assembly line could be traced, aircraft spaced exactly as human sources had reported. Rail sightings showed dozens of freight cars feeding the factory with materials. The assessment was blunt. Photographic evidence confirms human intelligence. Production rate appears accurate. Recommend immediate strategic reassessment. Goring, shown the photographs, dismissed them anyway, calling them American trickery, clever manipulation, scale models. Only one man inside the Nazi leadership truly understood what he was looking at. Albert Speer, Minister of Armaments, quietly obtained the intelligence. His private diary entry dated May 15, 1943, found after the war, captured the mood of a man staring into an abyss. "If the Willow Run figures are even half accurate, we face not defeat, but annihilation. They produce more aircraft in a month than we do in a year. But I cannot speak this truth. To do so would be my death warrant." Even Otto Ohlendorf, head of SD Inland and a trained economist, ran the numbers. His report to Himmler in December 1943 was clinical, and terrifying. Ford's peacetime output in 1941 had been 1 million vehicles. That capacity, he wrote, had been converted into bomber production. At current rates, by June 1944, America would have produced enough B-24s alone to drop the entire tonnage Germany had dropped on London in 1940, every single day. On Christmas Eve 1943, Canaris received projections for American output in 1944. B-24 Liberators, 18,000. B-17 Flying Fortresses, 12,000. B-29 Superfortresses, 1,000. Fighter aircraft, 40,000. Total, 86,000 aircraft. Presented with the figures, Hitler's reaction was pure disbelief. "They claim they will build more aircraft in 1944, he said, than all nations have produced in all of history. Absurd." By February 1944, Canaris was removed, suspected of defeatism and treason. His replacement, Walter Schellenberg, was a loyalist who would never risk contradicting Hitler or Göring. But reality doesn't care what leaders believe. On February 20, 1944, Big Week, the U.S. 8th Air Force launched Operation Argument, sending over 1,000 heavy bombers against German aircraft factories. In 6 days, the Americans dropped more tonnage than the Luftwaffe had dropped on Britain during the entire Blitz. Luftwaffe fighter ace Adolf Galland tried to force Göring to see what was already in the sky. "Herr Reichsmarschall," Galland said, "I have counted over 800 bombers in a single formation. These planes are real, and they are dropping real bombs." On June 6, 1944, the Allied Air Armada appeared over France, more than 11,000 aircraft. The Luftwaffe could muster fewer than 300 fighters in response. A desperate message reached Berlin: the enemy's aerial superiority was absolute. Intelligence had been right. Germany had not been deceived by American propaganda, Germany had been deceived by itself. In April 1944, Willow Run hit peak output. That month, employees working 2 9-hour shifts, 6 days a week, produced 453 aircraft in 468 hours, a rate equal to one finished B-24 every 63 minutes. The plant employed 42,331 workers, including 11,000 women, 26% of the workforce. It employed 3,800 African Americans, 9%. And 1,200 disabled workers, 3%. The war had become a factory schedule. A timetable. A math problem. And by then, the answer was no longer in doubt. That workforce breakdown alone should have detonated Nazi racial ideology on the spot. The people the regime called inferior, the groups it dismissed as weak, were helping outproduce the so-called master race by orders of magnitude. After the war, surviving German intelligence officers finally admitted how total the failure had been. At Nuremberg, Walter Schellenberg testified. "We knew the truth about American production by early 1943. Every professional intelligence officer understood the numbers were accurate. But to report that truth openly was to risk execution for defeatism." Hans Bernd Gisevius later wrote in his memoirs. "The tragedy was not that we lacked intelligence about American production. We were drowning in it. The tragedy was that our leadership refused to believe it, because it contradicted their racial ideology. And those who tried to push reality upward through the system paid for it." Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, executed April 9, 1945, at Flossenburg concentration camp. Hans Oster, executed April 9, 1945, at Flossenburg. Albrecht von, executed in October 1944 for involvement in the July 20 plot. Gisevius escaped to Switzerland and survived the war. What German intelligence had been reporting was later confirmed in cold, official accounting. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey documented Willow Run's output, 8,685 B-24s produced between 1942 and 1945. Peak output reached 650 aircraft per month. The bomber-an-hour pace was sustained for months. And as production matured, the cost per aircraft fell, from $238,000 to $137,000. In post-war interrogation, Albert Speer was asked a simple question: why didn't Germany believe the intelligence? His answer cut to the heart of the regime. To accept that Ford could produce a bomber every hour, Speer said, was to accept that our entire worldview was wrong. That democracy wasn't weak, but strong. That racial mixing didn't create weakness, but strength. That women could do men's work. It would mean admitting we had started a war we could never win. Who would tell Hitler that? On the line at Willow Run, one woman came to symbolize what Germany refused to accept. Roswell Monroe, the real-life inspiration for Rosie the Riveter, operated a rivet gun on the B-24 production line. Like thousands of women beside her, she'd never worked in heavy industry before Pearl Harbor. "We knew we were building something important," Monroe said in a 1984 interview. "Every rivet we drove was going to help end the war. Sometimes we worked double shifts, sleeping in the parking lot between them. We had brothers, husbands, sweethearts flying these planes." The cost of disbelief was catastrophic, because when leadership refuses to accept reality, every decision downstream becomes distorted. Fighter production: Germany continued producing bombers deep into late 1944. Resource allocation: resources were poured into wonder weapons, instead of practical defenses. Strategic planning: operations were designed to face hundreds of bombers, not thousands. Diplomacy: peace overtures were delayed, because the leadership could not comprehend the certainty of defeat. German economists who later examined captured documents were stunned by the scale. Willow Run cost roughly $200 million. German investment in the entire aircraft industry from 1933 to 1945 amounted to about $400 million equivalent. Willow Run's floor space reached 3.5 million square feet. All German aircraft factories combined, 8 million square feet. Willow Run's electrical consumption, 2.5 million kilowatts monthly. The Americans had built a single factory that consumed resources like an entire city. By war's end, the numbers could no longer be argued with. Total B-24s produced, 18,188. Willow Run's share, 8,685. Total B-17s produced, 12,731. Total American aircraft produced, 1940 to 1945 333,717. Total German aircraft produced, 1940 to 1945 94,700. The United States produced 2 times more aircraft than Germany, while fighting a two-ocean war. Historians would later call the German intelligence failure on American production one of the most consequential in military history. But it wasn't a failure of collection. German agents collected accurate, detailed intelligence. It was a failure of acceptance. Leadership refused to believe anything that contradicted its ideology. Dr. Gerd Weinberg concluded that German intelligence had accurately assessed American production capacity by early 1943. Had that assessment been believed, and acted upon, Germany might have sought peace 2 years earlier, saving millions of lives. The lesson is broader than one war. Cognitive bias, accurate intelligence can be rejected when it clashes with core beliefs. Ideological blindness, politics can override mathematical reality. Systemic failure, systems that punish unwelcome truth will be fed comfortable lies. Fatal miscalculation, underestimating an opponent leads to catastrophe. In 1985, at the dedication of the Yankee Air Museum at Willow Run, Roswell Monroe met former Luftwaffe pilot Hans Ulrich Rudel. He asked her the question that haunted an entire generation. How did you build so many, so fast? Monroe smiled. Honey, we just went to work every day and did our job. Nothing fancy. Punch in. Build bombers. Punch out. Democracy isn't complicated, she said. It's just free people doing their best. Rudel's reply landed like an epitaph. We were told democracy made you weak. That your diversity made you inefficient. We were told lies, and those lies killed millions. In the ruins of Berlin, May 1945, American intelligence officers found a final German report on Willow Run, dated April 20, 1945, Hitler's last birthday. Willow Run production confirmed. We reported this truth 2 years ago. We were not believed. Germany dies not from lack of intelligence, but from lack of wisdom, to believe intelligence that contradicts what we wish to be true. Let future generations learn, reality does not bend to ideology. Mathematics does not yield to mythology. Truth ignored becomes tragedy. The report was never delivered. By then Hitler was in his bunker. The so-called Thousand-Year Reich had days left, and thousands of American bombers, many built at Willow Run, delivered the final argument German intelligence had tried to make 2 years earlier. History's verdict is clear. German intelligence collection was excellent. German acceptance was catastrophic. In that refusal to face uncomfortable truth lies a warning for every nation. Reality doesn't care what you believe. Those who deny reality in favor of ideology are eventually destroyed by it. Willow Run built more than bombers. It built proof that democracy works, that diversity strengthens, that freedom produces. German spies counted them all. German leaders believed none. And that disbelief ended the Third Reich as surely as any bomb.